All right, we're back. CNBT 1311. My wife just corrected me. It was not marble. It was granite pavers that we used for the kitchen countertops and the entry hall. So I misspoke. It was granite, Italian granite. It's been here for many years now. It works well, and we used good epoxy-based grout and with additives in it, and it has worked very, very well. All right. Stone flooring. Sandstone, limestone, polished marble, or granite. Again, you go to the expense of putting this down. Sandstone is going to be soft. Limestone is soft. Marble is more brittle, and granite is super hard. When I did all that stone work at the house, I went to Harbor Freight and I got a good wet saw, and got a couple of good diamond impregnated blades from Lowe's, and it cut that granite like butter. And so when I got done with my project, I gave it to my son because I didn't want it back. I was done with my stone masonry and flooring deal. At my age, I'm not going to do another one. Anyway, my advice is that when you spec your job, you make sure that you get your color with the manufacturer right and the texture of the finish, and buy more than you need. Because the chances of you going back and getting that exact color match from the run from that quarry is going to be a iffy deal at times. All right. Stone flooring can be as much as a ½ inch thick. These pavers are not that thick, and it can weigh up to about 7.5 pounds per square foot. Tiles or slabs may be laid in regular or irregular patterns. Now, the more funky you get with the irregular patterns, the more labor cost it is. Okay, this would be the least expensive because you're doing a scribe line across the room, and you're just laying them in on the floor. Okay, and you got to figure out your patterns. Okay, so these are going to be one size stone. Then they got to crib these others, and then they also got to do the layout like that. This is going to be more expensive. So it'd be least. This is next. That's going to be more because you're changing directions, and then this is like random stuff. So, but a good flooring person that's used to doing this, it's a pleasure watching them work their craft. All right, cut stone flooring. It varies in thickness from a ½ inch to 2 inch. Mine was nowhere near ½ inch. You can get them less than ½ inch. We're talking about big, heavy slabs here. Okay. Here's the detail. You're going to want a 1 to 1.5 inch bed, and then you're going to want waterproofing underneath here if it's depending on what it's on. Okay. And if this is a concrete slab, you're going to want to make sure that that slab's floated with the leveling compound. This is going to be a thick set. I use thin set to set all of ours, but we were not ½ inch thick. Okay, here's thin stone units from a 1/4 inch to a ½ inch. I think mine were a 1/4 to the 3/8, and we used an acrylic. Yeah, here's the acrylic latex grout that I was telling you about. I would not go with a tight joint. You want to have a little space in here. That helps you level this stuff out as you're doing it to keep that lippage down. Remember the lippage? That's the difference between this edge and that edge. You don't want that. You want a nice smooth deal. So you're going to want a heavy trowel with the teeth in it to run that thin set to get enough of these ridges so that when you set the stone on there, then you can adjust and level it, because it'll collapse these little troughs in here, and you'll get a nice, neat, level surface. All right, resilient flooring. Clock's still ticking. All right, good. Resilient flooring. Yeah, this is high-tech petrochemical stuff. This stuff is relatively dense, a non-absorbent flooring surface. It's durable, it's waterproof. You can get it in all kinds of surfaces. You can put it on wood subfloors. You can put it on concrete subfloors. You need to follow the manufacturer's recommendation on how to lay this down. If you want it warranted, you will follow the manufacturer's recommendation. Now, the problem with the single underlayment is the drumming effect and the flex of that floor. Okay. Like any good foundation, you do not want to scrimp on your foundation. Now, he gives you some good advice here about provide a 2 to 3 inch reinforced concrete topping over precast slabs. That's because these precast slabs, they're not going to lay exactly flat. So you're going to want some wiggle room to level that out with a cast in place leveling bed. And you're going to want to watch your water mitigation. You may need a water membrane. So anyway, none of the resilient flooring type is superior in all respects. They all have their pluses and minuses. Okay. He talks about are the types that perform well in certain areas. These are rules of thumb. Again, your mileage is going to vary. This is a good little go by. Okay. I was in one house at one time. They had rubber tile in their kitchen, and it looked pretty neat. Seemed like it was kind of spongy. Wasn't real spongy, but standing on your feet a lot. It was fatigue resistance, and it was glued down, mastic down to the floor, and below grade, on grade, or suspended. And there's permissible locations for each one of these types. Okay. All right. There's no reason to belabor this. Here's a way to handle. This is called a butt cove. Coving. Here's your flooring, and then this is your coving that goes up the wall. Here's a straight base cove for carpeted floors. This is called the top set cove because it sets on top of the any type of flooring type. And this is a cove cap. There's a cap up here and a cap right there, as if you're going to run carpet up the side of the wall. Why you do that, I have no idea, but some people do. All right, carpeting. We're not going to spend a lot of time on carpeting because it doesn't matter what version of the book you're using. These carpet manufacturers change their specs and all the pluses and minuses and the good and the bad of the different kind of carpet. I particularly don't care for carpet when it's fresh and new. But for people with allergies and asthma and stuff, you can steam clean this and vacuum it and steam clean it, and you still have a potential for allergens, especially down here in this area. If it gets wet, gets stained, you're gonna have to rip it up. Some carpet's glued down. Some of it's nailed on nailer strips around the perimeter and stretched, and then nailed on nailer strips. Um, a lot of industrial carpets are low pile, and they're glued down to the floor, and you've got to strip them up. Another problem with carpet is the outgassing, which can be a problem with anything you put inside a residence or any kind of building environment that you're building. You got to be careful with the adhesives. Um, let that stuff cure and outgas. In some cases, you may just actually have to force ventilate the structure for several days while the stuff is curing. He goes through carpet construction here, where it's tufted, woven, knitted, fusion bonded, flocked, or needle punched. You can read all of this to your heart's content. The pile refers to the upright tufts of yarn forming the surface of the carpet. And he talks about the pile weight, pile density. The pitch is the crosswise number of tufts forming a pile, and then the gauge is the spacing of tufts across. The backing is the foundation in which all this stuff's adhered to, and then the carpet pad is can be of all kinds of stuff. He's talking about a cellular rubber. It could be a felted animal hair or jute over which carpet's installed to increase its resilience. We get into carpet textures. Cut pile is created by cutting each loop. A loop pile is created by weaving and tufting and knitting. So the top of the loop is cut, and these are looped, as you can see, and then a combination of looped and pile. Some are cut and some aren't. Now we get into ADA again, accessibility guidelines. The carpet needs to be securely attached to a firm underlayment. If not, it's going to roll underneath the wheelchair. It should have a level cut pile or a level loop. Fasten and trim all exposed edges to the floor surface, and bevel the edge trim to slope if more than a 1/4 inch high. Again, you need to check the current ADA guidelines and the building code if you've got ADA requirements. Okay, and he goes through definitions of plush, Saxony, twist, shag, level loop, ribbed, high-low, multi-level, cut and loop, and so forth and so on. All right, isn't this exciting? Acoustic ceiling tiles. All right, some of these can be glued in, some of these can be hung. I've been in some structures where the ceiling tiles were actually glued. Acoustic ceiling tiles are made in various sizes and textures from soft sound absorbing material such as cork, mineral fiber, glass fiber, and these modular units have perforated pattern or textured fissures faces. Allows the sound to penetrate into the fiber voids. Okay, and they come in a plethora of colors, sizes, finishes, etc., etc. Here's some general sizes: 12 by 12, 24 by 24, 24 by 48. The typical tile thicknesses. Metal pan tiles consist of steel or aluminum pan. You might have gone in some old buildings, in some old towns in Texas, and seen the metal roofing tiles or ceiling tiles that are nailed onto the underlayment on the high roofs. Consult the ceiling tile manufacturer for sizes, patterns, fire ratings, suspension systems, and everything else. Okay. and then the noise reduction. All right. Set with an adhesive on an underlayment. This is fastened to furrings. These are furring strips, and then these are fastened and nailed, and you've got a little space up in there. Okay. And this is sprayed on. It's a direct application of acoustical ceilings where they come in and spray it. Much like you would sprayed on fireproofing for structural steel. All right. Suspended ceilings. Now, I like suspended ceilings. I've always wanted a suspended ceiling in my house. But what's the problem with suspended ceilings? Now, the acoustical ceiling tiles can be suspended from an overhead floor or roof structure on a grid. That's your suspended ceiling, your typical commercial suspended ceiling. All right. Or acoustic tiles. And as we've talked before, HVAC ducts, piping ducts, your fire suppression system, electrical, are suspended from the floor above or the ceiling above. Now, let's say that this is a typical 8-foot ceiling, right? So if this is 8 feet, going down to the slab, if that's 8 feet, then how much space is up here? Well, it all depends on how much room you need up here. What size is this duct? Here's a steel beam over here supporting that concrete floor up here. All right. So, just to get an 8-foot ceiling in a typical room, this may be 3 feet. So now you've got 11 feet, or 12. That's 4 feet. Depends on how much room you need up here, right? So as you can see, that's why they don't do that in residences. Because then each floor is going to be 11 to 12 feet. If you're going to do platform framing on a 2-story house, then your first floor is 8 feet, your second floor is 8 feet, and then you go up to the attic, right? So, all right. Well, anyway, these are set up on grids. They bring in a laser level in here and set it on a tripod, and they set that grid and hang it and get it all level and shoot it through here, and that's an escutcheon where the sprinkler head pops through, and then they'll come in when they get it all level, they get it inspected, then they start setting the tiles in. These things are very, very good for doing maintenance after the fact. You can get up in here and remove all these tiles, expose all this work, especially if you've got chill water systems coming in here and you need to redo a pipe or redo a valve because it's leaking, and you just replace the tiles that have water damage on them, and you don't have to tear out a whole suspended roof of sheetrock and do all that. In HVAC, you can run your HVAC through your piping, through your lights systems, also some registers, and your return air. These are called main runners, and these are cross tees. So this would be a main runner, and that would be a cross tee, and then that's what the tile sets in. And you get the tile in all manner of fire rating, all manner of acoustical stuff, linear metal ceilings consist of narrow anodized aluminum painted steel or stainless steel strips. The slots between the space strips may be open or closed. And some people use these for air returns, delivering fresh air. Here's your HVAC, so you've got a combination of a register and a light system. Here's your air balancing coming through here. All right. Now you got a concealed grid. These are terms. A recessed grid and an exposed grid. And they get their name by what they are. This is an exposed grid. That's recess. That means the grid's set in a recess on the ceiling tile. And then that's a concealed grid. Okay. Now we get into wood joints. We'll finish this off. Wood joints. You see, this is kind of a cleaning up of stuff that he's left in. Now, this is not a woodworking course. It's not a fine woodworking deal. I used to do a lot of fancy woodworking in my younger days. Actually made a coffee table out of some old oak wood flooring that was salvaged out of a wrecking project. And anyway, here's a scarf joint. This is a square splice. So it's an inset, and this is a finger joint. Finger joints are cut with a shaping blade on a shaping table. We talked about board and batten before on wood siding on the outside of a house. Well, this is a back batten. My gosh, a back batten, and this is a front batten. Just like we remember the wood siding video. All right, end joints. These are ways of trying to join finer wood detailing. This is a fillet, and this is a spline. This is a tongue and groove, and that's a rabbet or a shiplap. That's the rabbet of the shiplap. Okay, and then that's a pin and dowel. Okay. This is a butterfly wedge. These are fun to cut. Most of those are cut with a good fine chisel, and it's an attempt to. The Japanese used a lot of these butterfly wedges. George Nakashima, a fine American Japanese fine woodworker, he would take big slabs of wood and join them with finely detailed butterfly joints. And I think the Museum of Fine Arts at one time downtown, over the museum district, they had a George Nakashima table. At least they had it stuck in the back someplace. Last time I was down there. Anyway, this is a dado joint. It's made with a dado blade, which is just a series of saw blades hooked together to scarf out large amounts of wood at one time. A dado is a rectangular groove cut in a member to receive the end of another wood member. Okay. A stop dado is not cut across the full width of the member. You do a partial dado cut and then come in here with a mortise bit and square that up with a mortise bit. This is a dovetail dado. These are usually done on a shaper table or with a router with the dado, with the dovetail dado bit. This is a dado and rabbet. That's a rabbet joint. You see the rabbets there. And dado tongue and rabbet. These are a pain. If that wood's not real good and cured, you'll end up splintering this stuff. And it'll break off, make you say bad words. That's a 90-degree joint. I don't know why they call it an angle joint. It's just a 90-degree butt joint. This is a good place for a spline joint in here. Um, get a biscuit cutter and you can biscuit that, or come in with a dowel and like a walnut dowel, so you expose the doweling that you drive through there. There's all manners of how to do this. You can get you a good book on fine woodworking and go to town. Problem is finding good, cured, dimensionally stable lumber these days for fine woodworking. Tongue and groove miter. This is a miter. There's your tongue and groove. Those are done with a shaper blade on a shaper table. Shoulder miter has a raised surface to limit the motion between the joined parts. It's got you a shoulder there. And this is a quirk. Kind of a funny name, but it's an acute angle or groove separating one element from another. It's a quirk. And you don't see a lot of those. And this is just a typical miter joint. What the quirk does is it solves the sin of a miter joint pulling apart. Cutting one miter from another, even as good as a miter saw you may have, you'll end up having the joints not totally meeting like this. Nice straight edge. So that's what the quirk does. It kind of opens that up a little bit. This is a true miter joint. If you don't get them cut exactly right, then they'll be winking at you. You'll have a little space in there. Or this might be tight down here and then open up at the top. But that's what the quirk theoretically supposed to do. It kind of hides that a little bit, or helps. I think we beat that up enough. Let's see. Inlap, it's just simply that. You come in here with the dado cut all the way across and a dado cut on that one, or you run it through your shaper table and you just lap it over. And this is a cross lap. It's called a cross lap because you got a piece of the material that's going to hang out over here when they join. And this is a mitered halving. This is a dovetail halving. It doesn't go all the way through. You better have some really strong wood, some super good hardwood, because these things have a propensity to, once you lock them in place, glue them, there's a weak point right there. Okay. Here's the definition of halving. It refers to cutting away half of each member at the place of joining so that a flush surface results. Again, that's a traditional lab joint. There's nothing fancy about that. And these are dovetail joints. These things lock into place. And these are done with a router and a dovetail jig. And I've got a dovetail jig somewhere out there in my shop. I haven't cut dovetails, and I think the last time I cut a dovetail was when I helped Noah build the ark. I'm just joking. But seriously, they're really nice. But again, you need some good, nice furniture grade hardwood. Set the dovetail jig up right. You've got the male and the female, and you use your router and you cut the dovetails. Here's a lap or half blind dovetail. And this is a secret dovetail or a blind miter. I've never cut one of these. Here's a blind mortise. To do this, you either drill and then come in with a mortise chisel, which is a straight-sided chisel that's sharpened very, very sharp, or you use a mortise bit on a drill press, which creates a square hole in the wood. Basically, the mortise bit has a square chisel frame. It's in a, and then in the side here is the drill bit. And so as this drills out the wood, then the chisel sides that you press down with the drill press cuts the square edges of the mortise. And then this is cut either on a shaper table or on your table saw. A blind mortise means it's blind. That means it doesn't go all the way through, as opposed to this mortise over here, which is a through tenon. So this piece goes all the way through. And it allows you then to drive a dowel through there or fasten it, however you're going to fasten it. This is a key joint. You better have some really strong wood for this. It slides through, and then this is a wooden key that fits through a key cut. You don't see a whole lot of that. I think Green and Green used to use that detail back around the late 1800s. Green and Green were a couple of architectural brothers that California, I think, is where they were, and they did some pretty neat fine woodworking details on their houses. But I digress. All right, this is a foxtail wedge. It spreads and secures a stub tenon when driven into a blind mortise. So you take a blind mortise like that, and here's your wedge that you cut, and that sets in here, and as you drive this in here, then that wedge drives up in here, spreads the wood apart, and then it grabs on the top and bottom of your blind mortise. As you can see, we're dealing with wood here, and if you don't get this cut right, you're going to end up splitting and breaking this stuff, and you're not going to have a good joint. This is a pin joint. I don't even know why he's got this stuff in here. I mean, it's cool for fine furniture building and fine woodworking. I mean, we're talking about the zen of furniture making. I mean, this really is. If you ever look up George Nakashima's woodworking, or who is that Finnish dude? I've got his book over in my bookcase someplace. Well, I'm not gonna waste y'all's time, me looking in my thousands of woodworking books and stuff. But anyway, this is a pin joint. The Amish would erect their barns a lot like this. They would use like round pins and square pins and drive them in. And again, this is the zen of woodworking. Haunch tenon is strengthened by a beveled shoulder at a blind joint. This goes back up into a blind mortise. And as you drive this in, the force of this wedge then forces that down. And I know some of y'all are going, well, why don't you just nail it and screw it? Well, yeah. you would. You'd come in here and you'd countersink a hole and put a nice wood screw in there after you glued this with a good wood glue, and then come in with a dowel. And when I was building furniture, I would use, if this was maple, then I would use like walnut dowels, walnut doweling, and then cut it and then sand this really, really smooth, going down to 600 grit, and then use tung oil or something like that, or Watco Danish oil finish, and it would really make the end grain of the walnut plug stand out. But then your furniture has to be designed so that you're taking into account the details, much like in the snap ties on a concrete wall, right? Some architects leave the holes where the snap ties were. And so, again, your imagination is the only thing holding you back. And this is an open or slip mortise. And again, this can be cut with a on a table saw, um, or it can be cut with a mortise bit, and or a flat end mill, um, a center cut end mill, and then this would be cut on a table saw. And you know, it's called an open or slip mortise because it's open, as opposed to a blind mortise. And there's another image of a mortise and tenon joint. All right, wood moldings. Oh my God, this is cool. Oh, we've got plenty of time. All right, crown molding. Crown molding is absolutely massive cool. I like cutting crown molding. It's a Zen thing. It's when you're cutting crown molding, there's several ways of doing it. When you're running it in, you can get on YouTube and spend lots of time watching people cut crown molding, and everybody's got their own way of doing it. I think Lowe's and Home Depot, they have a how to cut crown molding for the weekend warrior. Um, you use a scroll saw or coping saw to cope this. Um, when I ran the crown molding in my house, when I cut it, I didn't cope. I just mitered, and so on the inside corners you'd flip it and cut it upside down, and then on the outside corners you'd cut it right side up. There's all kinds of tricks and jigs to cut this crown molding, and get on YouTube and research crown molding and cutting it. Now, for some of these track houses, my advice would be to come in here and get a wedge, 45-degree backer wedge, and back in here, much like you would use in the concrete formwork. Remember, on the concrete formwork where we had a column form, and you would have these 45-degree form wedges in here. Remember that? Sure you do. So when you cast the concrete in here and you wreck the forms, then your concrete column would have a beveled edge, right? Well, all you're doing here is you're putting a 45-degree bevel on the backside to give you something to nail to and support the back of that crown molding. Now, if your sheetrock and your ceiling is level and square, the room is level and square, you could probably get by without that. But the deeper the crown molding, the longer the nails have to be, right? And you run the risk of cracking this by driving it through here. We don't want to do that. You take your nailer, finish nailer up through there, and take a finish nail back in here and hoping you're attaching to something. Okay. I always found it easier to take a 45-degree scab strip, run it in that corner, and that gave me something to nail to, and it gave me something to back this up, and it took care of the irregularities of the ceiling as the framers and the sheetrockers laid that stuff in. And then you got to come in with painter's putty anyway to cover all the sins of not putting it in quite right. Crown molding can really make the difference in how it looks. Okay. All right. He talks about a cope or scribe joint to meet an interior angle in the surface when undercutting the other molding to profile the first, and miter joints are used to joint at exterior angles. You can also use miter joints for interior angles if you know how to cut the crown molding. You got to flip it. All right. But get on YouTube if you're really interested in this, and you see how people do it, and you'll see how different people have different ways of doing it, and which I think is pretty cool. All right, rails. You can have a top rail. A plate rail is a narrow shelf fixed along a wall and grooved to hold plates or ornaments or whatever. So, I don't know, maybe you had a collection of plates or something. I've seen these in houses where you come in here, when you do this top plate, you'll run this on your shaper table. And my shaper table is a piece of aluminum plate that I've got an extra router mounted upside down. Or you can just use a regular shaper. Foley Bell Saw used to sell saws with multiple cutters in them to make all this molding. And so that's what this is. This is a plate rail, and that's a plate rail. This is a plate rail, and that's a plate rail. You hook the plate in there, and the plate then leans up against the wall and doesn't fall down or whatever. So here's the definition of a cornice. Some molded projection, picture molding is just that. It's like you're going to make a picture frame. We've already talked about plate rails. The chair rail is from the floor. Here's the baseboard. So a lot of times you put a chair rail around the wall in a dining room to keep the back of the chairs from marring the wall surface. Okay, and here's all the different shapes of the revealed backs and the different cove moldings, and there's probably many different, more than he's got in his book, that are floating around out there. Okay, and okay, let's see. I think 3 more pages. Yeah, this may be a little long, but that's fine. All right. Casings. Let's see. For use as trim, a variety of stock wood moldings are available at mill workshops. That is true. Just Google millwork, mill type of moldings. Just go to Home Depot or Lowe's website and look at different moldings they've got. And that's like for the weekend warrior, okay? A true mill workshop has all kinds of different shapes. Just hundreds of them. And door casings, that's the trim around the door. And they come in all different styles and size. Head and jamb casings conceal and finish the joint or gap between the door and window frames. Okay. We talked about door casings before, about pre-hung doors, right? You'd have a fixed casing, and windowsill again. The apron is the board underneath the windowsill. It's called an apron, just like an apron in the kitchen. You'd be wearing it. Interior trim is normally applied after the finished walls. Well, no kidding. Yeah, you're going to put the sheetrock up in the ceiling in, then you'll come in and put the finished trim. Oh my God, who would do it backwards? Because you want to cover. Okay, let's assume this is the wall covering, the sheetrock. Okay, this right in here. Okay, this would be your sheetrock. Well, yeah. If not, you got to butt the sheetrock up underneath there. Nobody's going to do that. Who would do that? Oh my God. All right. Well, anyway. All right. Shape moldings must join at a miter joint. Well, of course, because look, you got this shape, you got that shape, and if they don't, then it's going to be all boogered up. It's going to look nasty. Okay. This is a corner block. When my mother had Ed Bickle's company up in Temple redo her house on the lake overlooking Lake Belton, all her doors were done with a corner block on the door casings like this, and it turned out rather well, because if not, the benefit about doing this, then you don't have to worry about getting that miter cut, because if the door is just slightly out of square, then you got to come in here and measure this angle, and it might not be exactly 45, and the chances are it won't be 45. This might be 43 and a half on this one, and then you have the opposing angle over here, and oh my God, these corner blocks, they cover a multitude of sins as far as the out of squareness, of your door opening. And I don't care how good you are as a carpenter, there's gonna be some tolerance in here. It will. Cap molding goes on top of your door opening to terminate the head of a window or doorway. That's called a cap molding. Jam or side casing butts. Um, um, this would be your baseboard, butting up against your side casing. He says it should be at least as thicker than the baseboard. Well, yeah, okay. Your casing most likely will be. Your casing will probably be 3/4 of an inch, unless it's a cheap door, and then if you're using cheap baseboards, they're going to be thin. Or you can use. A lot of people are now using regular 3/4 inch material, 1x6s for their baseboards, and they butt up against the casings. And that looks pretty cool. A plinth block may be used to terminate a jam casing above the floor. I've seen these done in some pretty fancy houses. All that is just like a plinth, or a little. It's not really a pilaster. A pilaster is a column sticking out of a wall, but it's just a solid piece of wood so you're not terminating this down. So if you've got solid, let's say you're using a 1x6 for a baseboard, okay, then you'd butt that 1x6 up to a 1x6 plinth, and then drop your groove casing down, and that can make for a nice detail, especially if you watch the aspect ratio of this in here, okay? Make for a nice little aspect ratio. All right, wood paneling. We're not going to spend a lot of time on wood paneling. This is super expensive. These are built on site. The wood paneling is. You'll take your wood veneer plywood or medium density fiberboard. If you're going to go to the expense of actually building this, then why in the name of Zeus would you use fiberboard? Okay, that's pretty nasty. MDF. But you never know. I mean, this could be lumber core plywood, and then come in with an MDF relief, and then solid wood rails and stiles. They can be horizontal, they can be vertical, they can be raised panels, recessed panels like this. When my dad was still alive, and he did the recessed panel doors for the kitchen remodel up at their lake house, their retirement home, we set up a cabinet shop in the barn with a couple of shaper tables and made these relief panels. My dad wasn't a good electrician, but he was a good carpenter. He couldn't do electrical work to save his life. He got it wired up. As long as it didn't burn, it was okay. But he was a really good cabinet maker. I'm still fixing some of the wiring up there on my mom's house. We talked about cap moldings before. Larry Hahn has a couple of good videos. He's got a lot of videos. Efficient Carpenter on YouTube. I think I posted some of those videos. If assuming they're still good, I got a note from a student that today that some of the videos aren't live anymore, so I'll have to go back through and fix that. All right, plywood veneer. Oh my God, this opens up a whole. We could spend a semester on plywood and plywood engineering in the American Plywood Association, and oh my gosh, the grains where it's finished plywood, regular construction plywood for sheathing on the outside, a furniture grade plywood, hardwood plywood, Luan door skin plywood. We used to make a lot of racing sailboats in my younger days out of Luan door skins. We get 1/8 inch door skins, and you can get those in 4x10s and 4x12s, and at Schroeder's Hardwoods when they were still in business, and epoxy laminate those sheets together to make some really lightweight racing sailboats. tornadoes and that sort of thing. That was in another life. All right. He talks about matching patterns. Okay. So you want to match the grain patterns. I redid a house in Bryan my senior year in college for an art professor, and we wrapped his fireplace with bird's eye maple that we got from one of the last hardwood lumber yards or lumber mills up in East Texas, and it was matched grain, so we had them cut out of the log, um, and then matched it like this to wrap the fireplace mantle, and it looked really neat. Um, my ex-wife threw out all those photographs from that when I was cast from paradise many, many years ago. And but nonetheless, this is matching your patterns of your grain. Book matching arranges veneers from the same flinch alternately faced up or down. Now, I'm not going to beat y'all up over this, okay? Again, this is not a fine woodworking course, but this is book matching. Oh my God, I can't even speak English. I told you I was born in Waco, Texas, right? And mostly we're raised up through that area. We don't speak English there, so English is my second language. All right, here's diamond matching and slip matching, herringbone matching, and random matching. Means you just randomly match the stuff in some kind of pattern. Um, um, this is something you need to pay attention to. These are definitions. Um, these are easy test answers. Softwood veneer grades, N, A, and B. N is select, smooth surface for natural finishes. Like if you're going to use Wadco, Danish oil finish or tung oil or something like that. You certainly wouldn't want to paint on an N select. That's sacrilegious. A is a smooth surface suitable for painting, and B is a solid surface utility panel. You might use that on the interior panels of a cabinet or something. And hardwood veneer grades, and your mileage is going to vary because this stuff changes from year to year. It's what you can get, okay? Premium grade, and this is a definition, and it comes from the American Plywood Association. Good grade, sound grade, utility grade, and backing grade, all right? Um, um, and it's the amount of imperfections when they make the plywood. All right. All right. Now over here on this side of the page, it talks about grain figures. All right. The natural pattern or on a sawn wood surface. All right. Produced by the intersection of annular rings, knots, burls, and rays, and other growth characteristics. All right. And different figures may be produced by varying the way in which a wood veneer is cut from a log. Now, your normal stuff is a rotary cut. It's just like sticking this on a lathe, and you got a knife, and it peels off the veneers, and then these veneers come off in sheets, and they alternate them. So the grain would run this way on one layer, the grain's running this way. They coat it all with good resin glue, and then press the absolute fire out of it under heavy pressure. Flat or plain slicing means it's just that. They take the log and they slice through this way. Quarter slicing of a log, it's perpendicular to the annular rings. Okay? And then half round slicing, all right, of a flitch is mounted off center in the lathe, and then they slice as it's spinning around. And rift cutting is the slicing of oak and similar species perpendicular to the conspicuous radiating rays so as to minimize their appearance. In other words, we don't want to make it super rough because oak and similar species of oak, it cuts rough, okay? Whereas like maple, cuts smooth. All right. As you can probably tell, I spent a lot of time making. I spent a lot of time doing carpentry work. How's that? Did a lot of framing. So this is flat or plane slicing. This is quarter slicing. This is half round slicing, and this is rift cutting. All right. Simple definitions. I don't expect you to become experts or anything else. Now we get into plastic. Oh my goodness. We live in a plastic world. Um, um, how much time have we busted up here? We're fine. All right. Plastic laminate. How about Formica, which is a trade name for a specific, but everybody refers to it as Formica or plastic laminate or whatever. Okay. Now, in the ancient days of yore, they didn't make these countertops pre-molded like you can get them now at Home Depot and Lowe's and any other box store. You actually had to build your cabinet. My uncle, my mother's older brother, my little father, was a master cabinet maker. That guy could do anything. And when we were doing his house on the lake next door to where my mother has hers, after we got through dynamiting out for the septic tank and the rock and stuff like that, yeah, I had a good upbringing, man. Like, I was taught how to use dynamite when I was 13. You could just go to the hardware store and buy it back then. Anyway, I don't even know why I said that. It's true. I mean, but you would build your cabinet top, and then you would go buy sheets of this Formica, and you would have to contact cement this down, contact cement the back of the Formica, and you couldn't really make edged, rounded edges like that. You'd have to do them like this. And then you'd cut the sheets with a sheet knife, and then coat both sides with contact cement, and then you would lay newspaper and wood strips underneath it, align the sheets, glue them down, take a rubber mallet and a piece of wood and beat it down to get all the air bubbles out. And then you'd come in here with a special router bit that was angled, and you would put a bevel on that joint right there. So you'd have the edge banding, and then that, and that router bit looks something like this. Hey, we got a couple more chapters of this. I might actually be able to draw with this freaking mouse. What do you think, huh? Yeah, well, that's fine. All right. So anyway, so the router bit would come up, and this is a ball bearing, and that would hold it off, and it would cut. So the ball bearing would run along here on your router, and you would cut this little bevel, and then you'd do the same for the back, and you'd bevel that. But nowadays, since they've got all this pressure molded stuff and pre-done, El Cheapo pre-done cabinets or countertops, not a whole lot of that. You can still buy these sheets to do custom work with, custom stuff. Okay, so that's a plastic laminated countertops, and there's different ways to finish the edgings on them. Your imagination is the only thing holding you back. This is a deep edge banding, and this is a post form edge. If you can get this hot enough, you can actually bend this stuff, but you got to be careful. You don't want to burn it, like with a heat gun. And then these are the bevel corners I was telling you about. And then you can actually come in with metal edging if you don't want to do the plastic or the wood edging. And plastic countertops are pretty cool. You just can't set a hot pan on it like you can my granite countertops. And then they've got custom countertops that are made out of all kinds of composite materials now that some are not heat resistant. It's hard to beat granite for a kitchen cooking counter surface. I mean, you can take a hot skillet and set it right on that granite, and it's not going to hurt it at all. All right. High pressure laminate is molded. There's a company up in Temple, Texas. It's Art, and they've been in business for a gazillion years making uh, um, um, plastic laminate tops and formica and all kinds of stuff. All right. Most of these El Cheapo ones, this is all particle board. So if it gets wet underneath here, it's like all particle board. It's going to blow up. Um, and you can get them where they're more structurally sound. Um, anyway, and he mentions that up here. It's, where it's over craft paper foil, melamine, blah, 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 blah. They do use a phenolic resin on the particle board stuff, but still, if it gets wet over a period of time, it'll expand and start blowing out. Um, um, I've already said Formica's a trademark. Okay. Um, and these bins should be post-formed during manufacture and bonded with thermosetting adhesives, because they know what exact temperature that it's going to take to roll these things and mold them. But if you're going to do it by a sheet in the traditional old method, these details are what you're going to have to probably be stuck with. Okay, this would be factory edged, and this would be, you could do that on site. All these others. All right, now we're into mechanical and electrical systems. Now, I'm going to close this video out. This is 1 hour and 1 minute. It's not too bad. I don't want y'all to get too freaked out over this. I'm not expecting you to be wood expert carpenters or furniture makers or anything like that. I have a problem with chapter 11 in Ching. This is mechanical engineering. This is stuff that I used to do as an engineer when I would do heat load and heat calculations to size HVAC system and airflow. So we're going to take a real light cut through chapter 11. I don't expect y'all to do heat load calculations or MRT calculations or any of that stuff. But we're going to talk about a vocabulary so that you can speak intelligently to your contracting people. All right. Well, we'll see you on the next video. Y'all have been extremely patient, and like I said before, we're building this airplane while we're flying it. And I think everybody's done well so far. All right. We'll see you on the next one.